For this activity, we're going to look at 3 different substances. Each has been dissolved into water. So the first one I've got there already is copper sulfate. The next one is sodium carbonate. It doesn't look as pretty as the first one there, but this way you have an idea of what the reactants look like. And the last one is called magnesium sulfate. So magnesium sulfate, we'll put in this last one so you can get an idea of what the properties, at least what the visual properties of the substances are. We're going to take these substances and put them together to see what it is that will happen. So we're going to put these 2 substances together. We'll combine these 2 outside substances together. We'll combine these 2 substances together. So we've got 3 different combinations that we'll use to see what happens to the substances as they react or as they sit there in a tube mixed together but not react. So now what we're going to do is add together the different substances that we looked at for our reactants. So we've got copper sulfate already in this one. We've got the sodium carbonate in this one here already, and the magnesium sulfate down here. We're going to add to each of the test tubes the substance on the bottom, and we're looking to see if a reaction has taken place. So the first one, we're going to go back to the sodium carbonate, and we're going to add some to the test tube there, and the second with the magnesium sulfate, and so on. So we started at the blue end. This time we're going to start at the opposite end. So we've got our magnesium sulfate in there. We're going to add in our copper sulfate. And you're remembering to look for those indicators that we talked about in lesson 8. And I want to have a 1-to-1 ratio here, so I want to fill up the test tube with as much as of the liquid as I started with. So this one tricks a lot of people, and you can see because I had a clear liquid that turned blue that a lot of people think that there's been a color change that occurred here. But you have to remember, we're talking about a non-additive color change. That means there wasn't any color in either one of the substances that shows up in the product. So in this case here, we've got a blue that was already there. We have an additive color change. The middle one, we've got some sodium carbonate there. We're going to add the magnesium sulfate. So we've got a clear liquid with another clear liquid being added together. So if we did end up with a color, that would be something new because we don't have any color to begin with. So you can see we've got a white milky substance. When we combine these together, it's a little harder to see that it's thicker. The substance is a little bit thicker than what it was as well, like there are chunks floating around in it. There's our second combination. And then our last one, we're going to start with the copper sulfate, and we're going to add in the sodium carbonate again and see what happens there. Now remember, we already have blue, so if we end up with something blue in the end, that isn't a new color. So in that one, we've got some swirly, cloudy looking stuff on the inside there. Something that is formed there that's different. So I'm just going to hold each one closer so you can get a better idea of what it looks like if I can find the camera. So this is our first one here, the combination of the copper sulfate and the magnesium sulfate. You can see it's really blue, but it's clear, not different than what we started with. Our middle one, where we had the sodium carbonate and the magnesium sulfate, we can see a little bit more close up here. The bubbles and goop, it looks like, that's inside floating around. I'm going to go ahead and take the label off and just tip this for you guys so you can see how different the substance is, how thick and chunky it is rather than being watery like we started with. It's still liquid, but it's just a lot thicker liquid than what we started with. So there's that one with the chunks of liquid, chunks of something coating the outside of the glass as well. And then our last one is the copper sulfate and the sodium carbonate. And this last one is a really pretty one. You can see where there's some areas that are just clear liquid and some that are still really cloudy instead. So when we're looking at this one, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it to the side a little bit so you guys can see. You can see in there that the liquid has really separated from the rest of the material that's in the container. We can pour the liquid back down into, and then we can see, come on, focus. We can see the liquid, there we go, that separates out, leaving in that cloudy junk behind in the test tube. So those are the reactants that we're left with. That assumes that there's been a chemical reaction. If any one of these was not actually a chemical reaction, then it wouldn't be a product. It might be a mixture of two things, but it wouldn't necessarily be a product. So you have to use those tools that you learned about, those indicators you learned about, to figure out which is and which is not a chemical reaction, and to give evidence to prove that what you say is actually the truth. Good luck.